I'm going to read the topic and key lesson that's right in front of you, and then I'll hand it over to Guy. Here's our topic tonight. Enter the unseen temple of the indwelling divine. And here's our key lesson. I'm going to read it twice. Higher self-awareness is a sacrificial fire, both a flame and its light. It alone is capable of illuminating and then consuming the shadows cast forth from the world of dreams within which alone they dwell. The light of this awareness is a fire that does not burn. I'll read it once more. Higher self-awareness is a sacrificial fire, both a flame and its light. It alone is capable of illuminating and then consuming the shadows cast forth from the world of dreams within which alone they dwell. The light of this awareness is a fire that does not burn. All right, Guy, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Doug. A little adjustment, and we can get started. Welcome, everyone. As always, I'm glad that you are able to join us. I would hope, ideally, that you're tuning in live, but I understand that sometimes the timing isn't possible or the actual appointed hour. So whatever day or time it is that you are watching this and listening to me, I'm glad that we're able to have this time together. And most importantly, I'm glad that we're able to look at a number of really critically important ideas. Not that we become the purveyor or, if you will, someone who is trying to change their life through ideas, but rather to use the ideas for the purpose they're given, which is to produce in our minds and our hearts some glimpse, some understanding that if we're going to have a change of life, it's going to require something that we ourselves are going to have to not just understand, but participate in consciously. Now, I know that we've just passed, at least in the Western Hemisphere, this idea of a new year, and I have been speaking quite a bit for the last few weeks on this idea of changing our lives. So I want to just set the stage and then take us into the next level of understanding that I intend, by the way, to cover more deeply on Saturday. And then on Sunday, again, we're going to continue opening this book of life so that we can see and understand ourselves through what it wants to reveal to us and tell us about ourselves. I get letters and emails all the time. And in essence, and maybe you can see yourself in this, I would trust that you can, I hope that you can. It basically outlined my life is spent in so much time thinking and thinking and thinking, trying to find a way to bring this racket in my head, this confusion in my heart, into some kind of an alignment where I can stop doing what I have continued to do all along, which is react instantaneously to every situation that doesn't sit right with me. And for those reactions, hurting myself, hurting others, and most importantly, setting me into a place where I just know that something has to change, but I just don't know what it is. I can, again, paraphrasing these ideas, and I hear it, I can remember, usually afterwards, that whatever the storm is that's taken place is that it serves a purpose, that, if you will, that God doesn't make a mistake, that the universe is not a rolling of the dice, as Einstein said. And yet I'm still someone captured in this anxiety or this rage, whatever it may be. And I want to know, and I trust that you do too, what must I do to change my life? Because if I'm honest, what I'm doing now, which is usually some kind of retrospective action, looking back on what it was that reacted and carried me away with it, and then regretting or resenting or making new plans to fix all that. And so, as I've been saying and will continue to say, it is impossible for any of us to change our lives until we understand the need for a change in light. We cannot have a change in life until we have a change in light. Now, what does that mean? A change in light. It means simply that we need a new kind of understanding. But not an understanding that we habitually try to bring into our lives through reading and thinking about all these things. But a new understanding that allows us in real time to see what the moment is in real time and what our relationship is to the experience of that moment in real time. And we don't live in real time, you and I. We live in the time that follows the storm. We live in a time that precedes the storm. And we must begin, which is this work, to recognize that if we're going to have this, enter into this truth that sets us free, we're going to have to actually enter into this indwelling crucible, this temple, this life in which we always are trying to figure out what to do with moments, instead of realizing that if we were actually present in the moment itself, the instruction is in it. There's no need for thought. And yet that's all we know to do. So, transition the first few minutes, I'll ask you, when do we decide that we need to make a change in our life? Please think along with me. When do we decide we need to make a change in our life? Is it when things are smooth? Things are going well? Is that when we think to ourselves, I need to make a change in life? Or is it in those moments when suddenly, and it's always a shock, we find ourselves in the midst of some storm? Isn't that when something in us tells us, I've got to make some kind of change here? And then critical to the fact that the change that we try to make in life really doesn't produce a change in the consciousness that is the seat of that storm. Rather, what happens to us, by and large, is that for most of us, well, we think, I'm going to make this change. And then we start to plan, to dream, to figure out, manipulate a new ambition. And when we do, and this is important if I can express it for you, in that moment we become identified with what our mind has told us we need to attend to if we want to change the circumstances that we're blaming that stormy life on. And so we imagine, we dream, we go to sleep in a wave of thoughts and feelings lulling us, because then we are identified with the promise of becoming free when we achieve or finally change the conditions that we say have caused us this pain. And we never really understand the truth of that until, by law, the conditions that we had imagined and found some modicum of consolation in, until those conditions that we maybe were able to control for that long changed. And then the moment that they change, you and I both knows what happens. You and I both know what happens. I'm thrown right back into this fearful nature, so that whatever it was that I had imagined and then tried to produce, I wind up then trying to protect. And it never dawns on me that what I'm trying to protect, after I have come up with some way to deal with that storm, that what I'm trying to protect was born of the storm. That I was in a dream of some kind, and life came along and challenged the identity derived from whatever it was that I had imagined I needed to be or do. And then in a heartbeat, I'm in another dream. I'm in another plan, another set of thoughts, another way in which I need to deal with this. And I go without knowing it from a disturbance into a dream that mollifies it. And then the dream that was mollifying or making me okay runs into something that challenges it. And I just make this circle, believing each time that I've made some substantial change in my life, when all that's changed is the momentary identification with yet another dream coughed up by an unconscious nature that doesn't know what to do with life when something comes along and challenges what it's identified with. That's what all of our storms are. There is no other storm that we experience in life other than moments when, without our recognizing the fact of it, some condition changes, it rocks the boat, whatever we're identified with and believe in and hope in, all the rest of that, and then row, row, row your boat right back again, merrily down that stream, dreaming and dreaming and dreaming. Now, I'll tell you a story that I find really funny, but I think it's so apropos our study tonight about how do I go through this change of light as opposed to trying to change my life through dreaming. So here's two twins, a set of brothers, and they are born in Maharashtra, India. It's a state in India. And it's one of the states in India where, like Tankakara, there is a tremendous population of lions. And being born in the rural area of Maharashtra, they are both very wary, if not terrified, of the idea of tigers. So much so for the one brother that he can't bear living there anymore. And he tells his twin, I'm going to the United States of America. I'm going to live in New York City. The brother says, well, all right, if that's what you have to do, that's what I have to do. I can't bear living here with the fear of these tigers. So fast forward, a year goes by, and the twin goes to visit his brother, who has now been living in India in New York for this year. And he gets in late that night. Next morning, they decide they'll take a walk because he wants to show his brother New York, at least the parts where he lives. So as they're walking along, the two of them, the brother that had moved there first, he pulls out a pair of sticks. And as they're walking, about every 2 or 3 minutes, the one brother who moved there first is clicking these sticks. And the elder brother who came to visit him can see that his younger brother, twins, but still, so kind of anxious. He can't figure out, let alone why his brother is clicking these sticks. And so he says to him, is this something people in New York do? I don't understand. And the younger brother looks at his brother and says, no, of course that's what they do. He said, This keeps the tigers away. And elder brother kind of shocked. He said, this keeps the tigers away? He said, yes. He said, do you see any tigers? I hope you get it. He's in a dream. He's fast asleep. And more importantly, he's fast asleep, believing away from him. But here's the truth. He came to New York to make a change in his life, but he will never be free of his fear until he sees that he brought the tigers that he fears with him there to New York. And the tigers will always be there, and he will always be clicking these sticks wherever he goes, because he believes somehow or other that this technique will hold at bay what he believes is stalking him. Now, I hope that you can understand the parallel here, because we're going to look at it. Then we're going to make a list like we always do on Wednesdays to study this together. And you'll understand this more thoroughly as we go. Where is it in your life, in my life, that I'm clicking the sticks to keep the tigers away? Even though, clearly, in this story, there are no tigers roaming the streets of New York. So that the only tigers that he lives with are the tigers that he resists the feeling of the fear of wherever he goes. How does that man, how do you and I wanted moments that in one way or another we have found a method to deal with? Uh-oh. Sorry. I hope that I just turned off one webcam. I hope it didn't mess everything up. I saw a sign. Anyway, let me tell you another story to build on what I'm describing to you. This is a variation on a certain, I don't know what book I wrote this in, but you'll understand why I'm retelling it with the change in the theme. So here's a young girl, and she is the granddaughter. Her grandfather lives somewhere in the wild, in the northwest, in the open, in the big sky country. And she's always, her whole life was born and raised in some part of California. And for the most part, you know the saying, it never rains in California. Well, she's never seen a big storm of any kind whatsoever. And she goes to see her grandpa, spend 2 weeks learning something about his life and that lifestyle, because the mother and father want the child to be exposed to different environments. They also know that their father, grandfather, is a wise man. So off the child goes, arrives there. Grandpa picks her up at the airport, takes her out to this beautiful sprawling ranch that sits overlooking these massive open plains that sit behind them, the Rockies or whatever, great mountain range. It's panoramic. If you've ever seen anything like it, you know it's breathtaking, the scope of it, the dimension of it. And it isn't terribly long before that afternoon comes rolling in across the plains from over the mountains, these massive thunderclouds, and kaboom, crash, lightning, winds whipping across. And the grandfather had left the child up playing with some stuff in the room or whatever. He goes up there, and she's not playing anymore, but rather she's in bed with her covers pulled over her head. And he says to her, well, what are you doing? She says, I can't stand this. He said, well, what are you going to do? She said, I just want to go to sleep. I want it to go away. I want the storm to go away. Make it go away. And she's quite adamant about this, and he can see that she really does want to go to sleep. She wants to pull the covers over her head. But he says to her, in so many words, you know, sweetheart, if you pull the covers over your head, if you try to sleep through this storm, you'll never understand the lesson in it. You'll never understand the reason, not just for the way that you are responding to it, which is fearfully, but you'll never be free of the fear because you will continue to believe that the reaction you're having is natural given the condition. And I want to help you see something, if you'll let me, so that you don't have to be afraid of any storm for the rest of your life. Would you be willing to do that? Because she trusted Grandpa, and also because I don't have as much time as I'd like to tell the story. She said, certainly. So together they go downstairs, and he'd walk into that massive living room with these big windows, these large picture windows that look out over the plains and the mountains. And there's lightning and there's thunder, and you can see and hear the wind almost. And they sit together, the granddaughter and the grandfather. And every time there's a crash, she jumps, but he's not jumping, and she can feel his stillness. Grandpa represents a certain kind of wisdom, if you understand me. And as they sit there for a long enough period of time, the light begins to dim. And as the sun sets, the storm goes on, and it goes on for another 2 or 3 hours, and then everything gets quiet. And he says to her, would you like to go to sleep now? Yes. He said, this is good. They go to bed. He said, but now I'm going to get up early because I want to show you something. And when they get up early, he takes his granddaughter out into the fields, the plains where they meet the mountains, and the rivers are full. And overnight, almost, the grasses have begun to green in those plains. And everything is alive and vibrant. If you've ever been outside after a big rainstorm, you can smell the freshness. You know, and key to this point is that in those moments, though it doesn't seem so when we are recoiling from those storms, when it seems like, how do I say it, that things couldn't get worse, that it is those storms in nature, if you can see this with me, that are the most regenerative. In fact, in nature, it is storms that bring about the rebirth of herself in the new forms that are refreshed or that are given passage by that storm. And as they walk around and drive with his Jeep and look at all these things, he asks her, can you see this with me? Can you see that the thing that was so stormy last night and so troublesome, that all you wanted to do was to pull the covers over your head and go to sleep, can you see that if you had stayed there, that what would have happened is you would have been in a dream telling you that you needed to escape the storm, instead of understanding now that, back to the story, the way we try to escape these storms is by clicking sticks, by coming up with some way to deal with what we call the storm. And we're never free of them. And this little girl, I can promise you this, if you understood at all what I'm saying to you, this little girl was given a lesson that cannot be learned, gained in any other way. I'm going to summarize that lesson now. I'm going to ask Kate, to bring up the second key lesson for this evening's class. Any storm we will weather consciously changes the clouds. Any storm we will weather consciously changes the clouds. What this means, thank you. What this means is that when we understand that what we call this storm of life, we're going to talk about that in a moment, and we realize that it is part of a movement, that it belongs to a much greater life than we are aware of as we are, but that as we enter into that life and have this change in light, meaning this change in understanding why these storms come, what they serve, and how we are created, just like in nature, as above, so below, as within, so without. Nature is regenerated. She is reborn through the storms. You and I are intended to enter into these storms that we avoid at all costs, that we want to pull the covers over our head, so that if we will stay in the storm and weather it, meaning not try to hide from it, not try to cover it up, not try to click sticks, the very willingness to stay in it changes the clouds. Because the clouds we once feared, we recognize not only don't need to be feared, but they are the herald of a regeneration of this consciousness, when we, in our awareness, will take this consciousness into that moment and let that moment act on this consciousness as it has been created to do. Just as the storm is created to rebirth nature, so are these moments that you and I shun at all costs, intended to bring about in our consciousness, through our awareness and willingness to enter into that storm, a sea change that cannot take place in any other way. Now, take a nice deep breath, because I want to make a transition here before we build our own list. We are so habituated, conditioned, and not of our own fault. We're just born into a world that absolutely does not know what to do with our pain. What is any storm other than a moment where the conditions seem greater than our ability to deal with it? Consciousness that is forever looking for a way to cover up its unconscious nature, always trying to somehow or other prove to itself that it either can protect itself or that it can escape the condition. So we have become a race of beings that always simply want whatever the sweetest thing is that we can have, to make sure that whatever the suffering we may be involved in as a result of what we see causing that storm, what happened to Bill when he checked out? What does it mean he checked out? It means that it means the moment was too much for him. And don't think in grandiose terms. Don't do that. The moment was too much for him. What she said at dinner was too much for her sister that she said it to. The news, it was too much. The doctor's call, it was too much. And I want, if I can convey anything to you, and I will spend the rest of the time trying to convey this, there's no such thing as too much. Because what we call too much, the storm that's too much, is not the condition that we blame the suffering on, that we want to go to sleep and escape or pull the covers over our head. Any storm we will weather consciously changes the clouds. The clouds that we see in the moment come along and tell us this circumstance is going to steal or take from you what you need in order to be happy and whole. And so there's a corresponding relationship that we don't understand at all. Because why? Because at all times we simply want something to mollify, to console us. What do you think religion is in this world today? What do you think ambition is? All of these things are ways in which a time will come when everything will be okay. And all I want is to get through the storm. That's all I want. Just somehow get past it. And to get past the pain, the resistance, which is the only pain psychologically there is, to get past that, my solution is to check out. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. I've read or discussed a couple times this beautiful passage, this beautiful quote from Rumi. I'm going to do it quickly. He said, "Out beyond our ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Where the soul lies down in the grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other makes no sense." Well, I like that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Out beyond our ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. And we feel properly some part of that. But the other part of it is that we believe somehow or other there is this field, and you and I are going to get into it somehow. What we don't know is that what Rumi wrote before that part of that piece goes like this. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And then after that portion I read before comes this. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open, meaning that people just go back and forth. Don't go back to sleep. So there's a correlation that we don't want to hear between this idea that wherever this field is and whatever it meets, wherever the ideas of wrongdoing, right doing meet, wherever that is, it requires that we first recognize that every day, like others, we wake up empty and frightened, and all we know to do in that moment is to do what? When the storm is there, go back to sleep. Figure out some way, meaning this mind will begin to take the condition that it perceives, a condition that doesn't exist without its demand that the condition isn't that way, and then it will begin to try to fold that condition that it says is causing the conflict into something that it can deal with. And if it can't deal with it, then it wants nothing to do with it. And so we become storm deniers. We become deniers of the fact that unendingly we run into these moments where when life gets too painful, all we know how to do is check out. Because we don't know what else to do. That's all we were taught. That's all we ever saw anyone or anything do, is check out. And it should be so obvious, I hope, at this point, that we in our whole life has never been awareness of that storm. We understand the storm is not a threat to ourselves. The storm is a way in which ourself is revealed to us as someone who has come into that moment demanding whatever peace or prosperity is required by that imagined self. So now we're going to do some work together. This is where I invite you, and I don't know, Kate, where I'm going to find that list, but I'm sure you'll help me. There it is. Here's what we're going to do. Let's bring up the list. Thank you. It's in 2 parts. You'll see why we're doing this. Part 1, name some moment, a tempest of some familiar connected to part 1. What are some of the ways you have seen yourself pull the covers over your head? Name some moment, a tempest in your life. I'm asking you to write in on the message board here. You can do it wherever you are, wherever you're watching this. Send it along. Kate will give you the link. Or if you're on webinar, you can put it right in that patch. And Kate they'll put it up on this board as we go. A tempest, when it reaches a pitch, you find yourself, I just want to go to sleep. I want to check out. And then what are some of the ways you have actually seen yourself check out? Pull your covers over your head. I'll prime the pump like I always do. Simply put, is I'm just not prepared for what just happened. To be asking me, is that not a storm? And if in fact life suddenly throws this storm at me where I feel unprepared, what is the way in which I check out? How do I go to sleep in a moment where I blame what is happening and causing this? What are some of the ways that we check out? Simply put, how about this? I just decide I'm hungry. I'm going to eat. I check out by eating food. Here's another one. Somehow, someone I know is disrespectful to me. Is that not a storm when you feel disrespected? And when there's the storm of feeling disrespected, how do we go to sleep? What are the things that we do to go to sleep to check out in that moment when we have been disrespected? Resentment. When we resent someone or some situation, we've checked out of the moment. And we believe that our resentment of that person or the moment proves somehow or other that the storm is because of them. Can you see this? Are you following the line here? How about I'm disappointed with somebody? So you do that which is unbelievable, and I'm so disappointed with your behavior. So that's a storm, isn't it? And the way I know it's a storm is that I'm upheaval inside of me about you. So when I'm disappointed and I'm feeling the storm of that, what are some of the ways in which I check out? I go to sleep in that moment. I hope you're following me. When I blame any human being at all, I've checked out. I've left the moment in which my demand that you be the way I want you to be isn't met. And in that moment, I blame you for the storm when the storm is caused by a demand I have that you be what I need you to be. Can you see that with me? How the storm comes and how we check out? Let's go over to the board here. I hope we can get some people contributing. I'm trusting that you understand this well enough. Denise says, someone's telling me what's wrong with me. Yeah, Nothing like having someone criticize you. Is that not a storm? So here's the storm. You've criticized me. How do I check out? How do I check out? I just simply start criticizing you. I find some way in which to deflect the pain I'm in by assuring myself that you are equally as insufficient, inadequate as I am, whatever that may be. Charlie says, when anybody gets angry with me, that's a storm, isn't it? When someone gets angry with you, when someone's negative with you, an instantaneous resistance, a storm appears. So when the storm appears because someone is angry with us, how do we check out? Do you understand? How do I go to sleep? I go to sleep by talking to myself about what's wrong with you. I go to sleep, I pull the covers over my head by assuring myself that the whatever the problem is that you're upset about, I'm not responsible for it. I deflect it. The list is growing now. Good. When I make a mistake, I check out with blame. Yes, John, exactly. When Terry says a storm, anytime I am in self-pity, feeling sorry for myself is a storm. And how do I check out of that moment of the storm of self-pity? Are you following? When I'm feeling sorry for myself, I check out by judging myself. I simply cover the situation up by saying, well, you know what? It shouldn't be that way, or you shouldn't be like that. The storm is caused by identifying with something, and I check out by identifying with something. The storm isn't I'm a dream I don't know I'm in, and suddenly I'm shocked, and I check out by going into another dream. Gosh, I hope you can see this with me. Let me go back on this list. I'm missing a lot of stuff. Part 1, the storm, feeling inadequate, stupid, lacking discipline. Part 2, turning to food, binging, yes, purging, like shopping. Nick, I'm frustrated with somebody. How could they be like that? And how do I check out? By identifying with my disbelief that you could be that way. Now we're starting to get this. Good. Ellen, I'm besieged. The storm is I'm besieged by painful memories, by regrets. And how do I check out? I check out by judging myself for the character that hasn't changed at all. Randall, I check out when people disapprove me. Paul, I check out anytime I'm suddenly besieged by all the responsibilities I have. That's the storm. And how do I check out? This is good, Paul. I check out by procrastinating. I go to sleep by procrastinating, and procrastinating is exactly the reason why the responsibilities aren't being handled. I hope you're looking at this thing with me. I check out, Deborah says, the storm is born of avoiding a moment I don't want, and the way I check out is by continuing to avoid it. Roger, self-judgment. Shoshana, family verbally attacking, harassing me. This is good. She says, I hope you can all see this. I'm being attacked by someone I love or someone I know. And how do I check out? How do I go to sleep in that moment? By becoming aggressive myself. So my answer to the storm of feeling attacked is to attack back or to go into defensive mode, which is still the same thing. I just go into another dream because the dream that I was identified with has been shocked into a state of a storm. Neil, the storm, a gathering of old friends. I compare myself to their perceived success, and I go to sleep. I go to sleep. BT being sick. Well, I don't know exactly what he was saying, but everybody gets that. Have you ever been around people, and especially, how about the storm of people flaunting their success? Because it brings up inside of you what? The storm of I haven't measured up, I didn't make it like everybody else did. And then how do I go to sleep? By hating myself or hating them. By making a plan to get past whatever my limitations are so that one day I'll be on an even keel with these people. Gino, health issues. Yeah. A sudden health issue always causes a storm in us, doesn't it? And how do we deal with the storm of being told? And it might be, you listen to me, you will one day, if you don't die you're going to get some news. Hey, Guy, time's up. There's a storm. And by the way, if you've ever had cancer, that's a storm warning in advance. You get this storm warning. And how do I check out? I can't believe it. Why me? Self-pity. That's another dream. I check out. Gail, stress, judging, what should be. Rob, when things go south at work, it's a storm and I check out. Yes, this is a good one. When things go south with friends or at work, that's a storm. And the way I check out is by trying to appease those who are upset or trying to explain myself to them. All right, this was good. This was good. This was actually very good. Now, can you see, looking at this list with me, that we all, each and every one of us, know those storms almost daily? And if we know those storms almost daily, has anything we have done in the midst of those storms done one thing to actually regenerate our understanding into a new level where we no longer meet that kind of moment from the same consciousness? Or is every storm that we meet, does it turn into this revolving door that Rumi was talking about, where I go in and out and I simply am involved without knowing it, complicit with reincarnating the consciousness responsible for resisting the moment, and then in its resistance to the moment, me checking out because that resistance is telling me the moment's too big for me to deal with. What did the grandfather say to the granddaughter? Sleep through this. If you sleep through the moment when something in you tells you you're inadequate and you're in a storm of some kind of fear because you're not going to be able to pull it off like you've always done, or you're not going to win the approval that you believe is necessary for you to be a successful person. If you sleep through that moment, you will never understand the consciousness that goes before you to ensure you encounter a storm, let alone discover that that consciousness has no authority over you at all, other than the way in which it deceives you into pulling the covers over your head. This is where true teachings become so difficult for us. Because none of us want to be in some kind of storm. None of us want to be in the hands of suffering without either knowing what we have to do to escape it or what we want to do to sleep through it. Don't go back to sleep. The storms that we want to avoid are wake-up calls. They are moments in which a consciousness asleep to itself encounters a change in conditions greater than itself, or at least complicit with its development. And rather than agreeing to allow the storm to change the entire makeup of the consciousness that gives rise to it, which is the purpose of the storm. Again, look at nature with me. She never creates a condition that doesn't serve the greater whole of the world that she oversees. You and I are not only a part of that world, but we belong to another level of life, another world. And that world never stops bringing about the conditions that if we would, how shall I say it, stand in the storm, wait there, don't try to escape it or hide from it, avoid it. But let it teach us. Let it teach you the only way in which you can learn what you need to learn about yourself, which is what? If you've understood this, doing consciousness that begins here. That's what the storm is. It is a revelation of something that has come forward in time, a conditioned nature that we don't know is sitting there already set against anything that seems set against it. And the only way we will ever know is that we are not created to be set in anything, let alone some image or idea or belief about who we are and how things should be. The only way we would ever have any indication, any inclination to transcend those storms is when at last we see we've never escaped them. And that as difficult as it is, and if you could want to, you could call this the exercise. Catch yourself about to check out. And instead of checking out, check in. Checking out means instead of avoiding, instead of finding some distraction, we don't think to ourselves that blame is a distraction. We don't think that regret is a form of distraction. Because we don't understand that when you've got anger or fear or regret, always connected to it is the reason for it in the past and what we have to do or become in the future in order to escape the storm. And it's the very relationship between this past, this consciousness condition, and the circumstances that are there to release us from the grip, from being fixed in it. We run from the very thing that would release us from a misunderstanding about our true nature, because that's all we're a captive of. Catch yourself about to, or if you've already checked out, we just went through the whole list. I hope you can remember some of them. I check out whenever I'm trying to explain, avoid, or otherwise protect myself from the condition I don't want. I check out by looking for a way to deal with the condition, the storm, instead of letting the storm, the condition, teach me, reveal to me myself. Check in. That has double meaning, doesn't it? You know, you check into a hotel. Check into your own interior life. Check into it. If you understand the significance, the importance of it, then you will, with at least that intention of not checking out, but checking in, you'll see, oh my God, that's all I want to do is check out. I don't want to deal with this pain. I don't want to deal with this situation. I don't want to deal with this moment. I don't want to deal with it. And the only way you will ever know is that the only thing you're being given, in quotes, to deal with in that moment is what your mind is the tigers that you have brought with you into that moment. We just don't believe that about ourselves. We don't believe that the things we fear we have brought into the moment with us so that there can be a sense of ourselves in jeopardy. We don't believe that we are the tigers that we fear, that this consciousness is the tigers we fear. The only way you'll know that, and by the way, the only way that truth will set you free is when you see it clearly. And you can't see it clearly if you avoid the storm. Don't try to be something special. Don't try to do something special. Just try as best you can to see what you can see in the moment where the storm comes. When the tigers are stalking, when it seems like the moment is lurking. Just as best you can, check in. Don't check out. Okay, Kate, that's about 55 minutes. We can open it up if there is anybody that wants to share questions, comments. I turn it over to you, Doug.
All right, Guy, before you go, Kate just asked me to remind you to go to your sound settings and raise your output volume. Forgot to do that at the beginning. So just if you can do that while I give a couple brief announcements and we'll go from there.
Yes.
I just want to remind, go ahead.
Just let Katie know that I had done that to the max prior, and I've just made sure it's still up.
Okay. I think she hears you.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry guys. What happened is that Doug is coming across a very low volume on the multicast. So if you both have your input and output boosted, it should be better. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I have my input boosted. Let me just really quickly boost my output. We'll just take a second. Output is pretty high as well. Hold on. All right. We're dealing with things we don't normally deal with, so we're getting it down. But I just want to remind everybody that all these free online talks, as most of you know, are sponsored by our nonprofit Life of Learning Foundation, which is based here where I'm at in Southern Oregon, and Guy is the director. And just a reminder that, first of all, I want to thank everybody who regularly does donate and help us. We run just about completely on donations and sales of materials, and that's how it runs. And so you're able to, if these ideas resonate with you and you know they're valuable and you'd like to give any size donation, we're very appreciative. And you can do that at any time at guyfinley.org/donate. And the link is in the question box or chat box. And on the other platforms, you can go to guyfinley.org/donate anytime as well and help us where you can. A couple quick things. Friday night is our study group on Guy's talk from Sunday, and you're all invited to that. And that is at 7 p.m. Pacific. And as always, or most always, Saturday morning with Guy on Insight Timer is at 8 p.m. And then Sunday, a big day.
8 a.m.
If you're anywhere near Daytona Beach, Florida, do come and see Guy in person. He is going to be speaking at the library, the Daytona Public Library at 12:30, which is our regular time on the East Coast for our Sunday talk. So if you can make it, it's 12:30 Eastern at the library. /Daytona, you can get all of the information you need on that. And if you'd like to meet Guy there and hear a talk live, I can't encourage you enough to go there and do that. So, and those of you who can't make it, obviously you'll be able to hear it on these platforms as always. So, all right, let us go ahead and go to our question and answer time. Let me bring up, I have a couple of, there it is. written questions, and I want to invite you on GoToWebinar. If you want to talk with Guy directly, just raise your hand, click on that little hand icon, and we will smoother here than they have recently. And we'll try to help you. All right, so we do see Gloria in there. Go ahead, and everybody, if you'd like to speak with Guy, or you'd like to give an impression about this talk, or impression about your work, or some words of gratitude, you can do that and talk directly to Guy by raising your hand. Otherwise, you can write a question in the chat boxes or the question box. But let's see if we can get Gloria online here. She's there. I'm going to unmute you, Gloria, and just unmute yourself. So,
Hi.
yeah, there you go.
I'm figuring this out. Such a wonderful program. I love it. This resonated with me so much today. This talk reminds me of the talks I used to have with my grandmother when I was growing up as a young child. And we would always talk about how any kind of past pains that I would bury that feeling, but not deal with that feeling. And that feeling would remain there. Yes. And then all of a sudden, those feelings come up again. Yes. And the storm is starting to brew. And, that is how it resonated with me. So you just have to come to grips with the past hurts and pains that you've experienced, look it straight in the face and allow it to release and let it go.
Yes. Yes, that's
so much with me.
That's, of course, and gee, Gloria, there's so many things I would say to you, but I would just one comment ever so quickly. A long time ago, I told this story about a brave knight trying to rescue a princess or whatever it was to save the kingdom, and there was this creature that was amorphous, and it would take on anything that it could read about the character of the one who was trying to rescue the kingdom, and that person would be suddenly looking at and experiencing things that it had buried in itself in this amorphous shape that would look more and more like the rescuer. And then finally everybody was overcome because no one wanted to deal with seeing what had been buried and was being brought up. And the one night that finally succeeded, the apprentice asked, well, what did you do to vanquish that creature? And he said, all I said was, thank you, I didn't know that about myself. Thank you, I didn't know that about myself. One can say in moments of storms, please God, please Lord, please Christ, please the divine, whatever, please help me understand what this pain is about. And that's the right way. Please help me understand this storm. And if one asks in earnest to participate in that upheaval in a new way through a new light, then the clearer the understanding that I can't make this go away. I've been trying all this long. I've pulled the covers over, but I can't. And in that moment, if I stay there and do not check out, then I will see and discover something about that character or quality that I could have passive nature that produces the revelation. And in the end, Gloria, it is always the revelation that releases us from what had been concealed, because now we see it and we understand it, and we're not trying to get rid of it anymore. We recognize that we are going to participate in a divine process, really, in a union that grows in its increasingly by our willingness to participate that way. So I'm encouraging you as best I can to learn to continue to ask to understand these storms instead of explaining them to yourself. That's it.
All right, we have several written questions. Let's go with one leftover from the last class, Guy, from Rebecca. She asked, does Guy have thoughts to offer on what feels like extreme job dissatisfaction as I near retirement age? I'm currently 60. I'm trying to pay attention to what the lesson is. I feel conflict of maybe having lived by others' expectations, and I also my concern of possibly losing creature comforts.
Yeah. Listen, Rebecca, if you're online with us for this talk, the whole talk this coming Sunday is about the question you've just asked. The whole talk. So don't miss it. It'll be a lot better just to join me then and listen in. You will hear some new things. You will be given a way in which, instead of trying to change your life, the understanding of the necessity to change the light by which I see these moments in my life. And you will be, I promise you, rewarded by your willingness to share that talk with me. On we go, Doug.
All right, here's another written question. This one comes from Roy. He says, you talk about the prodigal son a lot, but I've never heard you talk about his brother, who faithfully stayed home with the father, but still he was jealous and felt son. He is not celebrated and isn't talked about that much, if at all, in teachings.
The story about the prodigal son and his brother and the father, Roy, briefly, is a story about two different levels of consciousness having two different experiences of the same situation. The brother that stayed, who didn't get the party thrown in his honor, never ever learned what the brother who left did. Because the brother who left then understood his father's mercy. The brother who left understood his father never took his eyes off of him. The brother who left, in one respect, had died. And now he's returned and he lives. Whereas the brother who stayed, that level of consciousness, and I'll just throw this out for you to mull over. You could think of as the story of how the angels in heaven, these higher beings, they have no choice. They serve the will of the Father. They stay with the will of the Father. But it is the lesser that the angels are jealous of, human beings, the prodigal sons, this consciousness set out that can come back and come back changed because it has found the goodness of the Father. No way of knowing that, let alone surrendering to it, unless you have been apart from it, and then you see your part in being apart from it, and then return. That's the best I can do for now, Roy. That's a big topic, and maybe I'll explore it in.
All right, Guy, let's try Shoshana. I'm going to unmute you, Shoshana. Let's see if you can unmute yourself. Great.
Good evening, Guy. Good evening, everyone.
Hi,
I want to thank you, Guy. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, it's great.
Oh, wonderful.
It's working.
The timing was perfect. I just received my new style of journal diary for the year, and I was wondering how I was going to approach this year. So this talk was just perfect timing. I wanted to say words are very important to me. And as I saw the words get aggressive go across the screen, it was not something that was inherent in me. It was something that I was seeking and getting. And so then I thought silly to myself, well, can you come up with multiple choices on how to react when you feel hurt or get aggressive? And so I wanted to share my three, which were get quiet, get into a shower. If I couldn't be quiet, would just get moving out the door. So those are my silly three, and I just want to thank you and wish you a very happy new year.
Yeah, thank you, Shoshana. And look, get quiet of the three is the best, but not if in getting quiet, I'm trying to control my relationship with the storm. That's the whole thing. We're not here to control our relationship to the storm. Anything that wants to control its relationship to the storm believes that the storm is outside of it. The storm isn't outside of us. The storm is a movement. Energies themselves. Again, things that I'll be going into ideally on Sunday, if not Saturday, Insight Timer. So stay tuned, Shoshana.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go next to Susanna. And this is two parts. Regret is a distraction with a question mark. Isn't reviewing our regrets being aware of the condition? And then an addendum, she says, is blame a distraction? Aren't we being aware that our difficult condition was caused by the nasty people?
No, Susanna. I'm going backwards the other way. I'll go from the top. Regret is a distraction. Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I didn't do the good I did the evil I didn't want to do. The storm of regret is always connected to this idea that I am a terrible person for what I've done. I wish I hadn't hurt somebody. On the surface, this all sounds right. But how many times, Susanna, Susanna's not alone in this. How many times have I said something impatiently? How many times have I just snapped at someone or something? And then after that happens, failing to see that the reason I snapped was because there was some instantaneous resistance, so that the storm of that moment was immediately, I resist you, I resist this situation. And then to prove somehow or other that I am not the one who did that, then I go into regret. I go to sleep when I live in regret. Now, but not to confuse it, remorse, entirely different. I said this, and as I'm saying it, and right at the moment, I can see, I can understand, oh my God. And how do I say this to you? And there is no sense of, that's it. There is no sense of I in remorse. Regret is nothing but I. Remorse is the revelation and realization that I haven't control of my life. That something owns my mouth and something lashes out unbeckoned, and then I regret. Remorse is seeing in the moment that I have no authority over my own life. That's remorse. So first, yes, regret is absolutely a distraction. It's just something else for me to identify with, that I wouldn't identify with it if I weren't somehow or other believing that I shouldn't be that kind of person. Now, is blame a distraction? Absolutely. Blame proves to me that I'm not the one responsible for my anger. Blame proves to me that this terrible suffering I'm undergoing is the result of some condition beyond my control, such as nasty people. No, blame is a way in which an unconscious nature, blame is the way in which it pulls the covers over its head, because as long as I can blame you for my pain, I don't have to see that it's my demand that you be what I want you to be that's responsible for the storm and the pain, Susanna. Going into, everybody pay attention, going into any form of thought about an unwanted moment is pulling the covers over your head. If you would stay with the pure awareness of that situation, then you would start to see how that situation and that pain, how about this? that the tigers that I fear have come with me. My dependency and identification with whatever those thoughts are that life challenges just triggers more thought. That's the best I can do for now, Susanna.
All right, let's go next to Cece. She asks, what if the perceived threat, tigers are real? And what if the tigers are really real?
I got it.
Yeah.
Well, Cece, if you were sitting at home and you heard a crash at the door and there was a tiger standing there, would you have to think to yourself what to do? Would there be any way in which in that moment you would want to go into a dream? Would you check out and then pretend like, if I cover my eyes and I don't hear any growling sound, the tiger doesn't exist? That's ludicrous. That's what Rumi was saying. Where is that thing? The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. What is he saying? The movement of life in the moment of light. The movement of life in the moment of light has secrets to tell you. Let it tell you. If there's a genuine threat, then there's no reason that you need to think about that. We think about threats that are proposed to us by a consciousness that believes it possesses what it needs to be safe. That's why that story is silly, Cece. Do you see any tigers? No, of course you don't, because I'm clicking these sticks. Let us understand, again, one more time, that thought and going into thought is going to sleep. And that the reason we go to sleep is because the nature of thought that was disturbed and calls the moment a storm. That's it, Cece.
All right, Guy, here's a question from Ian. And he says, thank you for the wonderful talk tonight. I recently started watching your talks and surely appreciate what you do. His question is, after I check into the moment and brave/bear the storm and the accompanying pain, what should I do next? How do I get to learning from the storms so that the next time I do not experience it as a storm? Thank you kindly.
So there's a couple points here, Ian. The first and probably the most important one. Speak or mine. This mindset takes the idea of a storm as a problem. That's the mindset. Any unwanted moment, any sudden shock is an unwanted moment or a shock to this sense of self, this identity that has come through time with me, my personality, my beliefs, my opinions. All of that conditioned nature comes through time, travels through time with me in an unconscious nature. The storm that it says is a storm is because the condition that has suddenly appeared challenges everything about the conditioned nature that has derived its identity from its beliefs, ideals, and what it has amassed that it needs to protect. That's what the storm is, a threat to something we're identified with. And those are the only storms. And the resistance to that moment is this nature refusing to see, on one hand, that what it was identified with was imagined, otherwise it couldn't be threatened. And more importantly, that the way out of the problem that of my imagination being challenged by this moment is to just go into imagination again. It's silly when you see it. So first thing is, we're not trying to learn from these storms so that we have no more storms. that assigns the storm to a circumstance outside of the consciousness responsible for its appearance. There is no storm outside of this consciousness that has set itself up as a mini God in its own imagined kingdom and repels and resists anything that challenges that world. And we've spent our whole life, the whole world has brought us to this point where in these bodies and in this consciousness that is our consciousness, we actually believe there should be no unwanted moment. And the world can't wait to sell you solutions to unwanted moments. And every solution the world gives you to an unwanted moment that places you back in the world of desire and the demands connected to it is another distraction, another way in which we pull the covers over our head. Lastly, the storm teaches you, Ian. Meaning that when I enter into the awareness of something without thinking about it, I can see. And when I can see the whole of something, the education and the action inherent in the education, no choice for me to make, it's made for me. One day, if you work, you will be in a moment where a fear appears because something is challenging, something you're identified with, and you won't have to think to yourself, what do I do with this fear? How do I escape this storm? You'll understand that by grace, actually karma, has brought about a sudden awareness of a circumstance in this consciousness that it does not know, lives in it, and suddenly there it is, and you will be the observer of the whole of that moment instead of someone unconsciously serving what your consciousness has told you you must do to escape the storm. That's all for now.
All right, Guy, here is the last written question, and it comes from Laura. And she says, I've been working with Guy's teachings this past year. And she says, I have a dear friend that was murdered about 7 months ago.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it for any amount of time because it overwhelms me. Is there a way, a perspective that can help me process? I cannot even connect with her family because it's so overwhelming. How do we function and process things that are so intense?
If you haven't heard this before, what I'm about to say, write it down. Laura, write this down. I can't overestimate the importance of it relative to what you're asking and to the whole of your development as a human being. As goes my attention, so comes my experience. As goes my attention, so comes my experience. Now let's take that idea and plug it into this description. A friend of mine was murdered. There's no question that that's a terrible thing. This is a world beyond description in its depravity. The depravity of this world is because over time, men and women unendingly are trying to find a power to help them get through moments where they feel they are being overpowered. So that you have this cycle of feeling powerless, creating the desire to acquire power. And the more I acquire power through whatever the conditions I imagine will protect me, the more likely I am to feel myself in a storm when that proves to be futile and powerless. So you have a powerless nature, imagining a power that will protect it, and in the imagining of the power to protect it, identifying with that condition, and then every time that condition is challenged, which it always will be, return to this powerless state. So this is a model to see. Now, I said, as goes my attention, so comes my experience. Laura, where is my attention when the memory and the pain associated with my friend's murder, where is my attention in that moment? My attention, and I didn't put it there, my attention is given over to this emotionally packed memory, an experience that is gone. It's gone. The only place it lives in and on is in a consciousness, now listen, that in order to continue the experience of itself, will revisit the very thing that as it revisits, Laura, it resists its own visitation. So this sleeping nature creates a storm and then says, I hate the storm, I can't deal with it. So try to see this with me. Try to see that the real pain in the moment isn't in the memory. The pain is in the memory I don't want. The pain is in me not wanting to relive this moment. So if you see that with me, Laura, you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. Who is reliving this? Who wants to relive something that every time I relive it, I suffer? And then you'll get an inkling. You'll start to see what Ian needs to see, what everybody needs to see. There is something in me that takes the tigers with me wherever I go and then tells me how to not be afraid of tigers, or tells me at all costs, avoid this place where the tigers are. The past and its pain does not exist outside of an unconscious nature that cannot wait to revisit the very moment that it says it doesn't want, because the more it revisits that moment, the more powerfully that sense of self is developed and further conditioned, I might add. So I'm describing to you why it is that you feel overwhelmed, because the more you resist the moment you don't want, the bigger the moment becomes that you don't want. And it's overwhelming because you don't understand. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire to put it out. The only way in which you put this out, meaning the way in which you begin to transcend this bitter, painful memory, is by recognizing that this consciousness brings it up and brings it up and brings it up. And anything suggesting the parents' names, the family, anything triggers it. And the moment it's triggered, what happens? Storm. And the storm is the resistance, not the thing that's to the circumstance itself, Laura. I hope that helps. Over to you, Doug.
All right, Guy, that's all we have. There's no more questions and no one in the queue, so I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. So I think at this point, I say good night. Kate, I turn off.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Unless you have something else to say.
All right.
Yeah, if you don't have anything more, then we just say goodnight and you hit the stop stream button and we're good to go.
Okay. Good night. Join me Saturday on Insight Timer. Very important material, and then building on it again Sunday morning. It's all for free.